Good morning, everybody. It is 10 o'clock. We're going to get started. Wow, I'm loving all the conversations. Good morning, everybody. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. My name is Alex Zegment. I'm the president of the organization. Just want to say welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us today and engaging in some fantastic conversation, eating some great breakfast. Speaking of breakfast, who here enjoyed breakfast? All right. So our breakfast team gets here early in the morning. In fact, Kathy was here at 6:15, and shortly after, Henry was here helping set up, and then Barb was here, and then, oh my goodness, all kinds of people just show up and help. And David was here too. So if you would like to assist with setting up for these events, please let us know. There are plenty of people in the room that will assist you with getting started. So the two people I'd like to point out are, is Michelle here? No? Nope, Michelle does not make it. Okay. So, okay. She's on Zoom. Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome on Zoom, Michelle. Michelle Popejoy is, and along with Rada Rosenberg, are our service and participation directors. They will, if you have a volunteer activity that you would like to attend or even suggest, these are the individuals you would like to speak to. The other thing that I'd like to mention is we are actively looking for upcoming Sunday speakers, and Stacey will definitely take down some information should you like to suggest a speaker. We do have a form that is available online for you to check out. So, forgot to mention, this is a nonprofit organization. We do not get paid here. However, we do gladly take donations. Roger here will definitely empty your pockets should you like to do so. So, that being said, one of the things that we have done recently is taking a look at some of the local schools and their needs. With Emerson Elementary, is that correct? We are doing a supplies drive today. In fact, after this meeting, we'll be in a board meeting, so if you'd like to run to Costco real quick, grab some supplies that are on the list. It is on our meetup page, what they are asking for. We have a number of things up here already: notebooks, markers, pens, Post-it notes, and also, Roger.
And also we can take credit cards, debit cards, cash, check.
Yes, we can take money and use that money towards going and making the purchase for you should you want us to do that. So check out our meetup page if there's something you'd like to donate to help us get. One of the things, the reason we were doing this is what we have learned is that a lot of the times when teachers need supplies and the school doesn't supply them, the teachers pay for those supplies out of their own pockets. So we'd like to help alleviate that, especially considering that teachers, by the way, don't get paid enough. So for all they do, my goodness, we should be helping them as much as we possibly can. So we have a number of different events that are coming up here pretty soon. One I'm going to invite Rada to talk about in just a moment. The next event after this will be the board meeting. So if you want to know how the sausage gets made, it can be messy. So just, if you'd like to make suggestions about some of the things that we have upcoming, stick around for the board meeting. It happens right here in this room at noon. But we're also doing a lot of online events, a lot of service events. I run the philosophy night for us as well. So, just check us out on Meetup. There's plenty to do. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we are getting close to hitting a goal that we have been working on, and that is getting our YouTube channel up and running. We have all of our live stream stuff is sitting up there live. I'm trying to get some edits out for some of the older talks from 20-ish years ago. So subscribe to our channel, should you like. Watch the videos. There's plenty of great information out there, some surprising speakers out there as well. And I'm trying to post as much as I possibly can to get that up and running. However, we're also doing some sound and video upgrades here in the next few weeks, and that costs money. So one of the things that we have going online is our Patreon account. It's in the description of the YouTube channel, but also you can find it also on our website. even if you donate $5 a month, that goes towards the AV fund. It helps not only keep the stuff that we have, all of the AV stuff that we have now maintained, but future upgrades as well. Some of the sound that we're going to be working on. So just consider that if you'd like. We'd greatly appreciate the help. So again, school supplies drive, but now I'm going to pivot over here to Radha for our, what would you call this? Would this be a Humanist Minute?
I'm a humanist and I'm taking a minute. So it's a Humanist Minute. I hope at least a couple of you are a little bit excited about this slide. Really for Life, American Cancer Society. It's a wonderful event. I've participated like 5 times in previous locations where I lived. So this is basically a fundraiser for American Cancer Society. Don't be fooled by relay. It's not a race. There's no running involved. I wouldn't have been signing up for any running event. It's a track at school, and there is tents and tables of organizations, and people just do laps. There is a QR code here that you can scan and go to our Teams page. You can give us money, join our team. There is a little lie on this slide. The first call will be on July 30th. Check the meetup. There will be a Zoom link. And ask me if you have any questions. And I'll keep talking about it because it's kind of far away on the meetup calendar, so not many people would see it. But yeah, join me.
Thank you, Radha. Okay, so just going to set some ground rules as we get kind of moving on to our next phase here. Please remember to silence or otherwise turn off your phones. During the presentation, we ask that you not speak and hold questions to the end. And when the mic comes to you, remember to share the air. And by the way, if you don't know what that means wait, when your time is done with the microphone, please let that time be over until we raise your hand again, and I'll come back around to you for any questions you may have. But conversations with the speaker after the microphone has left you, people online can't hear you, and it's disrespectful to the people who have waited in line to ask their questions. So please wait for your turn for that. That being said, I am going to start the slideshow here and introduce our speaker. So, today's speaker, we have Mr. Mark Klym, has a Master of Public Administration degree and is certified by the University of Rhode Island Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies as a Level 2 Kingian Nonviolence trainer. He has over 30 years of experience in violence prevention programs and is on the board of the Culture of Peace Alliance and a co-founder of the Phoenix Peace Builders. Phoenix Peace Builders helps communities heal from generations of trauma through positive change and within and without. Mark is currently working with a coalition of community partners and the city of Tempe to build a restorative justice youth diversion program. So, very short bio, but we greatly appreciate it. Please give a warm welcome to Mark Klym.
Test 1, 2. Sounds like it works, huh? Very good. Good. Setting a little timer here. I can get a bit verbose, so hopefully we'll keep it in good timing. So thank you very much for inviting me here. You'll see up on that slide there's a few partners that I have. The Panteras. Pantera is Spanish for the Panthers, and that's a group I work with. They work with housing issues for those who are low income and live in situations where their apartments are not taken care of well. Nonviolence Legacy Program is a partner organization of ours. No Judgment, Just Love, a wonderful partner of mine is that. And you'll see I also have HSGP. So thank you to the Humanists a while back. You folks had donated towards our 5K run and were a sponsor of us while we're developing this restorative justice program. So thank you very much for that. Right, yeah. So Dr. King is a role model for me, along with Gandhi and Doris Day and other leaders of nonviolence, including David Thoreau within our country as well, right? So I would like to first acknowledge that the land upon we're on is unceded land that had been inhabited for centuries by indigenous folks. And also that our country would not be what it is without enslaved labor at one point, right? And unfortunately, maybe some folks want to head back in that direction again. Let's work to prevent that. Yeah. My mentors and the creators of much of this information that I'll be presenting today are Dr. Bernard Lafayette Jr. and David Jensen. They were, Dr. Lafayette, as a mentor, I encountered him about 15 years ago. He gave a presentation about nonviolence. He worked directly with Martin Luther King Jr. when he was in his 20s. He's a freedom rider. He and David Jensen have been working together for many years. They were both co-founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And for those who might not be familiar with that, SNCC, it was a very powerful organization that believed in nonviolence, and they worked and collaborated often, sometimes clashing, but worked with the civil rights movement and responsible for many things. There's a movie, Selma, out that features the work that Dr. Lafayette did. So this material that I have here, much of it is condensed from a 16-hour workshop that we do that's very interactive. And I've selected bits and pieces of it, talked to Stacey and talked to Rada and Michelle about things that they would like to do. And as Stacey points out, these are challenging times that we're in. And many of the people here go out and go to protests around. I've met some of you at some of the protests that I've been at. And violence could erupt sometimes at any time. So I'll be speaking a little bit about how to de-escalate some situations. We'll get to that as we get near the end. I will be talking about just a little bit about the pervasive nature of violence within our society and the Kingian principles and steps, the will and skill, if you will, that Dr. King had pulled together from literature. He was recognized as a philosopher as well as being a leader of the civil rights movement. We'll see on the top, I talk about my journey to nonviolence, so I personalize it a bit. That, in fact, I had been in the military at one time, and so did not believe completely in nonviolence at one point. But I've had a journey, a progression to there, and I'll share some of that as I go along. So talk about effective nonviolence for a just peace. You might think about what is justice? What does that mean? And give examples of personal and community de-escalation techniques and how we might prepare for that. So, nature of violence in our society, the study of endless wars. I was in the Air Force for several years, 20 years off and on. I never retired. I never went to combat, fortunately, but I studied for it. I studied for disaster preparedness. And since the military, I actually have renounced violence as a reasonable or even a feasible mean to resolve conflict. Interestingly, while I was in the military, I learned a lot of nonviolent techniques. There's a lot of people sometimes call it nation building within the military, but I worked most of my time in the Air Force in human relations and dealt with complaints of sexual harassment and discrimination and also substance abuse. The Department of Child Safety, I'll mention, I actually then retired from the Department of Child Safety, otherwise known as CPS, here in Arizona, known as Department of Child Safety, formerly called Child Protective Services, so child welfare. Right now, part of the violence in our society, we have 10,000 children currently in foster care at any given time. It fluctuates between about 10,000 and 15,000. So that's a lot of kids who are harmed. That's a lot of families who are disrupted. That's a lot of children who face neglect and abuse. And those are just the ones that are most severe cases. There's a lot of domestic violence that exists in our society as well. Discrimination. So there's a lot of disparity issues within child welfare and children who are removed. The black population within Arizona is 5%. However, 16% of black children tend to be removed. OOH stands for out-of-home care. Native Americans, they comprise also 5% of the population. However, 8% of them are removed disproportionately. On contrary, white folks, like myself, we face much less issues with children being removed. And it's a complex situation as to why there is that disparity, but it does exist. So while white folks comprise 83% of our or our state population, only 33% of the children are removed from homes with white parents. You'll find the same disparities, we call it disproportionality as well, within our prison population. Most of our prisons are filled with more people of color than anything else. And for those of you who might be students of the Civil War and Restoration after that and Jim Crow laws, our prison population really increased dramatically after the Civil War, as there were amendments put in there that abolished slavery, but allowed for the imprisonment of people, and that was allowed. And so the prison population has just increased. We have the largest prison population of any Western country in the world. And of course, nuclear weapons, climate crisis, immigration issues, domestic violence, the issues go on. So while a lot of us, I think, would like to believe there is no violence, maybe we have nice little lives, but we're surrounded by it. Had an interesting discussion earlier at a table about nuclear weapons and whether our scientific ability has outshadowed our emotional ability to really handle weapons or climate change. So what I'd like to talk about are ways of handling all this violence that is around us. There's some people that feel pessimistic, that feel like there is nothing that we can do, that there's a powers that be that control the violence, they want to have violence. Some of us may believe in violence, many of us do. But there are things that we can counteract, and so this is one way I want to talk about it, through Kingian Nonviolence and some of the things that we do. So there are 6 principles and 6 steps of Kingian Nonviolence as codified in a lot of the writings. And Dr. King is quite a philosopher. A lot of this material is taken from his pilgrimage to nonviolence and also the letter from Birmingham jail where he was arrested. They're quite moving pieces of work. So the second of the 6 principles of nonviolence I'd like to highlight in the talk today, one is the beloved community, is the framework for the future. Now, some people think that the word beloved community is more religious in nature, and in fact, Dr. King was a Baptist minister, but he appealed to everybody. He worked with atheists. He worked with LGBTQ folks. He worked with white folks, much to the chagrin of some of the people that he worked with as well. So For him, there's many definitions of the beloved community, and maybe, this might be some questions that people have. Often that comes up in some of the workshops that we do. But for me, the working definition I have of building the beloved community is actually very similar to what the result would be of your 10 commitments here. Working for peace and social justice, service and participation, the wonderful activities that you're doing with schools. For me, it's a society where everybody has the chance to reconcile their conflicts and have equal opportunities to prosper and to reach their highest potential. Now, equal is an interesting word because there's some people that have been so oppressed for so long, they're starting down here where a lot of us are starting up here. So to really make it, I'm talking about building a level playing field and to help uplift folks who've been oppressed or who are the victims of violence. And that includes white folks, not just people of color, but certainly people of color have been, but those who've been victims of poverty. Dr. King identified that there's a very similar actions taken for those who are in poverty, regardless of the color, and people of color have been similarly oppressed. But so, the beloved community is that framework. So that's a goal to think about. And then the third principle of nonviolence that I'll be talking about is addressing the conditions of evil and not the persons committing evil. So that language, some people object to the word evil. Some people believe there is evil in the world. Some people feel like that creates more harm by saying that. So it's okay in these to substitute words that are more meaningful for you. Later on, I'll talk about the conditions. Well, here it talks about the conditions. So what are the conditions of a conflict? And we want to address those rather than attacking an individual. So I'll be going in that. Some people might call it, hate the sin but love the sinner. So we really want to focus in on that. It's so easy to be blaming individuals rather than look at the underlying causes. And then principle number 5, I'll be addressing somewhat as well throughout the presentation, is avoid internal violence as well as external physical violence. So what I've come to recognize certainly in my journey is the violence I have within me. And it can take a lot of preparation. I've been married for 32 years now, my second wife. My first one, we lasted about 17 years, but just not, things didn't quite work out. Have a wonderful relationship, but boy, have you ever noticed, some of you maybe have partners, work with people, how sometimes the simplest little thing can be upsetting, I think particularly early on in relationships, or if conflict isn't dealt with. Like maybe your partner squeezes the toothpaste the wrong way. or the toilet paper is turned the wrong way. Huh? Right? Uh-huh. Often those funny things come up because of underlying issues that aren't worked out and not really understanding each other or being empathetic. So we really want to take a look at what is it that upsets us and look at those conditions within us. I think peace really starts within, and then within your family, and then from there to a larger community and to other nations. I've seen many activists who have not done a lot of that inner work. And most of the conflict, Greenpeace, for example, I met a Greenpeace activist over in England. She introduced me to some Buddhist readings, which are interesting. Some of you may know Buddhists are actually, technically they're atheists because they don't believe in a single God, huh? But they have a wonderful philosophy. But anyway, she was talking about all the conflicts within the Greenpeace group. So, and you know what? Conflict is inevitable. We're going to always have conflict. The thing is, how do we deal with that? That is a concern. Yeah, okay, yeah, me too, right? So,
Greenpeace are right here.
oh, you're Greenpeace. Oh, very cool, very cool. Love to talk to you some more about that. We have a member, for those online, we have somebody raise their hand that they're a Greenpeace member and do wonderful work as well. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about. And then also the steps. Now, the principles of Kingian nonviolence, and in our workshop, we go into depth. We really take them apart. We ask people to criticize. What are the objections to those principles? Why do they really work? Because we really encourage critical thinking and not to take any of this on face value, but to see if it's worked for you. And in my journey, I've applied a lot of these principles and the steps and have found they've been very effective, both at home and within the community. But it can take a lot of self-preparation. And also, what I really like about Kingian nonviolence and this level is the idea of reconciliation. That is the last step. So the steps are functional kind of things like getting information, educating others. That self-preparation is really to do that inner work to help remove violence and acknowledge whether or not you can be nonviolent in a social action or not. And if you can't agree to be nonviolent, there can be other work for you, but maybe just not on the front lines where you're going to be, maybe have things thrown at you or people yelling at you. And then reconciliation, the idea and what Dr. King really promoted, and others, so many others who worked with him, Rosa Parks, of course, Coretta King, his wife, is an amazing woman in herself and very nonviolent and was practiced nonviolence before she met her husband, Dr. King. But the idea of reconciliation is we all live in one community. And again, it's not whether or not we're going to have conflicts. We are. We're going to disagree, even on the silliest of things. But it's how we address those conflicts that makes a difference. And as we are maybe going out and protesting, how are we going to address those conflicts if we're upset with some policies of our nation? The idea is always to allow the other person to save face. So you don't attack an individual, even if they turn a fire hose on you, even if they threaten you, even if you disagree with them politically. You make room for love for that person. That doesn't mean you have to be friends with them, but you may live in a community and you're going to have your kids are going to go to school together. And so we need to learn to find ways to live together even if we disagree. Okay, effective nonviolence for a just peace. Had a bit of a discussion with some of my new friends at a lunch whether or not we can actually face the violence that is in our society, and can nonviolence really work? Well, I want to give you some examples. From a historical perspective, starting in about 1955, the year I was born, by the way, I take pride in I was born right about the same time that this movement was kicked off in Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. Are there many people here who are aware of the civil rights movement, studied it? A few people. Yeah, I see a few hands up. I wish I could see the people online as well. I bet some of you are familiar with this stuff too. Some of this is lived history for us. So the civil rights movements, the protests, the nonviolent protests, the marches, the boycotts were proved to be effective in many ways in what was a brutal system of segregation in the Deep South with Jim Crow laws. And there were lynchings, all of that was very active then. Not that that doesn't happen now, but it's different, and I believe it is less, thanks to all the work of these people. So in Montgomery, there was a bus segregation issue, and for a full year, people chose to walk. Black folks, at the time, they could not sit in the front of the bus. A lot of times, they would pay their fee at the front and then have to get out of the bus and move to the back of the bus. And it was not uncommon for the bus driver to drive off before they could get on the back of the bus again, even after they paid their fee. So after a year, the Supreme Court ruled that they desegregated the buses. 1961, the Freedom Rides, where they segregated the buses, and that their action was to desegregate them. There were Dr. King, Dr. Lafayette, my mentor, was hurt critically during one of these. Buses were often bombed, but they stuck with it. Robert Kennedy got involved and invoked the Interstate Commerce Commission ruling that desegregated those buses on federal routes. So those two things have stayed in effect. 63, Birmingham, there was hoses that were turned onto children, powerful hoses. The issues there were segregation of public facilities and lack of job opportunities. And out of that movement, where a lot of people got hurt, by the way, is the Civil Rights Act of 1964 with affirmative actions. Now, some of that is rolling back, and some of the leaders of the civil rights movement put some of the blame on themselves for kind of resting on their laurels a little bit and not teaching nonviolence. So Dr. Lafayette made a commitment to King before King was assassinated to promote nonviolence and to institutionalize it and internationalize it. And that's what I'm trying to do somewhat too. And then Selma. There's a movie about that. SNCC was very much involved, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Voting restrictions and rights were the issue. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 came out of that. Now, of course, some of that's being rolled back as well. So we have our work to do to keep going with that. Now, some more recent events can be found in some of these resources. There's a wonderful book. It's very thick. It's called A Force More Powerful. There's also a DVD that we play in our workshops, a portion about Nashville, the Nashville sit-ins. Dr. Lafayette, again, played a big part in that to desegregate lunch counters. Black folks were allowed to purchase stuff at Woolworths and places like that, but they could not sit and eat at the counters. There were separate water fountains for them and movie entrances for movie theaters, all of that kind of stuff. So it shows that movement, but it also shows the effect of Gandhi in India and his nonviolent movement to separate India from the British rule. A lot of people will say, yeah, but nonviolence, that all sounds good. That might work between people, but it wouldn't have worked against Hitler and the Nazis. Well, actually, in that book, they describe how Denmark actually outmaneuvered the Nazis. We don't have time to go into detail here, but through protests, through work slowdowns, through staying home sick, they did do some sabotage, so they did some violence and blew up some factories, but they separated the means that that the Nazis wanted to use the resources of that country. They made it where it wasn't possible. And there were much fewer deaths. There wasn't many Danes who were killed but they were more effective in removing the Nazis. And then the Solidarity movement defeated the Polish communism as well. So it really goes into a lot of detail. Something more current, another resource some of you might be interested in, is Why Civil Resistance Work by an educator, Chenoweth. She's from Columbia. Had a team working with her. She set out, this book came out about 10 years ago, and it was an analytical and research study of, there were about 100 wars over a period of about 20-year period, and they were analyzed. Wars and nonviolent conflict reconciliation processes, nonviolent civil resistance. And they compared her. Chenoweth's argument when she first went in to do this research, Columbia University, was to show that nonviolence really doesn't work. That was her working thesis. It turned out just the opposite, that nonviolent resistance is twice as effective as violent resistance. And that a lot of it was because the people in many countries around the world who did this action, they were able to mobilize the population, and enough people were able to come out and really to make a change and separate the sources of power, because really the people in power, they need all of us to really make things work. We need to be compliant with what they want to do. They were non-compliant. Also, I mentioned I'm from Department of Child Safety. I worked in social work for a long time on a more local level. There are many programs of peace, evidence-based programs that are very effective, actually, say, for example, in reducing child abuse and neglect. I managed a number of programs. We put out contracts. there's programs like the Peaceful Parenting Programs. Triple P is what it's called. Some of you in here may be aware of it. But I just want to say, and there's many other programs. I worked in child abuse prevention many years and worked in communities to develop programs to help children stay safely in their homes. Because a lot of the parents who end up abusing or neglecting their kids, they're repeating what they learned. And unfortunately, in our society, like we put more money into nuclear weapons and our military than we do in programs of social uplift. That goes right at the state level too. Schools, educators really get underfunded, as do social service programs. We could, wow, turn things around if we were able to put more of our resources into programs of social uplift. But we're trying, so we do a bit what we can. Let me talk a little bit about personal and community de-escalation. So what we do when we go into a conflict, whether it's personal within your family or in the community, Dr. King was saying to understand the types of conflict that exist, so you understand the motives of people, and then also look at the levels of conflict. We'll focus more on the levels of conflict, and then we'll look at some de-escalation methods and what can be done. So here's one that's called pathway conflict, where you see people want to work together, they have the same goal, but they have different approaches to things. On a personal note, my wife and I love to hike. We love to go out and do things. Literally, had a hard time agreeing on which hiking path to go on. I mean, talk about silly things to argue about. We had the same goal. We wanted to be outside. We wanted to get some exercise. And my wife would say, okay, yeah, you pick the path, I'll follow you. So I'd go along merrily. Anybody been at South Mountain Park? Doing, yeah, some of those? Yeah, wonderful hikes out there, huh? Wish we're getting some rain. It'd be a little bit greener out there, but it'll come maybe next year, huh? Yeah, right? Okay, global warming. We'll see what happens with that. But anyways, so I would say, okay, great. And I'd go along a path, and she would be behind me, and then I wouldn't hear her. And I'd turn around, and I see she took a detour somewhere else. And that would upset me. It's like, why? What? You know? And eventually, I looked at what is her motivations, where is she at? She loves, one of the wonderful things about her, she's impulsive, and she sees something over here, she wants to go and find out what it is. So we resolved that conflict. I let her choose the path. Even if she says, okay, you go however you want. I said, I ain't playing that game. We'll sit here in the car until you say, okay, which way should we go there? And it works out beautifully, and we laugh, and we figure ways to work it out. You know, like to give on those things that don't really matter for the greater goal. Types of conflict, mutually exclusive types of conflict. So different people want to do different things, and but they want to work together, but they don't know. A lot of times in our departments, at work, we talk about working in different silos. A wonderful example of a protest action and how people with different goals actually can work together is a friend of mine, Kazu Haga, a wonderful nonviolence trainer. He's written books on it, founded organizations, and he was in California and protesting about the building of a new prison system. And he was wanting to reduce the number of incarceration. He'd rather see more work to go into rehab, substance abuse programs, rather than housing people and imprisoning them. Yeah. There was another group that was also interested, who was an environmental group. They didn't want to see this pristine environment destroyed to build a huge complex, a prison complex. So they had different goals, or different means of getting there, but they chose to work together on that. Distributive conflict, that comes in lots of things. Rather, maybe a dated picture, but of President Obama there looking at healthcare reform. A lot of people say that there wasn't enough money to provide health insurance for folks. And of course, some of that's going away now, dramatically. But there really is plenty of money. And it's just a matter of, like Dr. King here said, one of these things, there's no deficit in human resources, there's a deficit in human will. So as in studying the type of conflict, and when you're in conflict with people, whether it's your partner, your children, your parents, or nations, it's helping to understand what are their motives and what are they looking at, what are their values and beliefs. And here we go to values. Religious values, secular values, values about having violence is important or not. Helping to understand that is critical. So what we talk about and spend some time on when we do in these workshops, we work with youth, we work with adults, we talk about the different levels of conflict. And so where before we were looking at what are some of the causes and underlying issues around conflict, here to understand de-escalation, often it helps to understand, and we broke it down in 3 simple levels. And of course, under the types of conflict, there's other types of conflict, but we found those 4 were helpful. Here we're looking at 3 different basic levels of conflict. So this is what we call the normal, this everyday conflict. Maybe getting here on time to have breakfast when you've got a conflict with maybe your partner, your or work or something like that might prevent you from getting here. Financial problems, differing expectations, pecking order, the conflicts that we experience every day. And how do we respond to that? Using things like nonviolent communication, staying calm is an important one that I'm going to focus in a bit on. And doing something simple, just like giving a smile, do some deep listening, acknowledge the other person, problem solve. Those things can really go a long way to managing conflict. The next level, the middle level, is where things start getting heated up. I don't know if any of you have been in some of situations like this, but I can find even myself, I've gotten into conflict situations where this is where you start feeling agitated. Your frontal lobe is starting to disengage. You're going more into the reptilian brain here. You're upset about something. Often, you're charged with emotion, and there's sometimes some unresolved conflict that's going on there. Sometimes the real source of a conflict isn't even what you're talking about. But it's at this time where people are starting to stand up, they're pointing at each other, their voices are raised. Now the response to these is try to model going back to the normal level. Often taking a pause. Like it was Alex right up here up front. I loved it. When he got up, he was getting ready to speak. He took a deep breath. What a wonderful way to kind of reduce that tension. And then listening. It's so important to listen. I'm so amazed with my wonderful wife, especially early on. Well, even now when we get in conflicts. Initially, if I got upset about something, I was wanting to prove myself right. As opposed to really listening to what was her issue, and she was doing the same thing. But when you slow down and listen, I found out, wow, she really had some important things to say. And she had some really good values. And not that I thought she never did, but if you get into a conflict, sometimes you forget that. And finding common ground can often make all the difference in the world. Sitting down, de-escalating, and acknowledging the other and deep listening. So you model it in your speech and your actions, even going over, if you're in conflict with somebody, sitting down again. There was a workshop that we did, and back in the day, anybody remember Sheriff Joe Arpaio? Okay, yeah, a few folks, huh? Okay. I don't know if I'm wandering off camera here, if people online can see me. I don't know if I need to be tethered here. Huh? You got... Oh, okay, great. Once I was doing a workshop, and there were at least a couple lawyers there. And at one table, we had tables of 5, there was, and we were talking about conflict and how to resolve conflict. One lawyer was a friend of Joe Arpaio. The other lawyer had litigated several lawsuits against the Sheriff's Department and Joe Arpaio. Before I knew it, I'm glad I had a partner with me at that workshop. The two of them are standing up and they're yelling. They're just like the people shown here. And, hey, this is a peaceful workshop. It's going So what my facilitator and I did, we calmed the situation by just slowly walking over and standing next to them. And we're silent. And they became aware. They forgot. My goodness, they're in a room full of people. And here they are arguing. And that really helped just to calm the situation. And then we separated. We took a pause in the meeting. So just doing something simple like that, as opposed to maybe yelling at them and telling them sit down and shut up, I don't think that would work too well. Now, the conflict level of pervasive, as we call it. There really is a lot of tension. Oh, wait, here we go. Let's go to the next one. There we go. Overt. I must have hit the up arrow instead of the back arrow. Overt is where violence is actually erupting, and there's, a lot of times unresolved conflict, and maybe the person was triggered by something, even if people didn't know each other. So how do you deal with that? Well, the thing to intervene is stop the violence. You want to have trained people who can do that. I'll show you an example later of what worked and something like that. Something unusual but genuine may help with a situation like that. Dr. Lafayette was, like I said, a freedom rider. They were protesting at one time a bus station where they did not allow, not only did black people have to sit in the back, but they could not eat in the restaurant at the bus station. So they did a sit-in at that bus station. The bus station restaurant closed down. When he left, Dr. Lafayette left with his friends. His friends went elsewhere. He was by himself. There was a lot of upset taxi drivers who usually go there and eat at that place. And they were starting to harass Dr. Lafayette. But he recognized, okay, they're upset about this. They're not getting their food. They're being inconvenienced. They're trying to make a buck to support their families and themselves. So they pushed him and they shoved him. He did not fight back. He stood up, brushed himself off, and walked forward. And again, they were pushing him. He got up again. And then something unusual but genuine, he said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I'm sorry that you couldn't get your meal, but I need to make a phone call now. Would you mind if I go over to that phone booth and make a call?" They were just shocked by his humanity. He looked at them. He didn't argue with them. He didn't call them names. He didn't get mad at them. He had learned and trained himself to respond that way, and they just opened up and let him go. They saw him as a person, not as some dehumanized, evil person. But there is risk, so be careful if you're going to try to break up a conflict like that. So some personal examples. The man showed there, Hassan Clement, wonderful guy, a fellow trainer in nonviolence. He's also the leader of the Panteras in Tucson that works to get housing rights for people who are low income and usually don't stand up for themselves. But he was doing a training. I wasn't present at this one, but he was doing a training in nonviolence and going through some things we talked about. They did some role playing too, and they was working with teenagers. And it's a multi-day workshop. That teenager came back the next day after learning about de-escalation and sitting down and modeling that. This teenager gave the story. He often gets in a lot of arguments with his father. I had that issue with my father a lot. And what usually happens is the two of them are yelling at each other and they're standing up and nothing, it's a mess. What this teenager did is he sat down, he was quiet, and he listened. It shocked his father. All the energy was sucked out of the room of argument because his son wasn't arguing with them. And they were able to sit down and actually work through their situation. Mesa protest. I was involved in one not too long ago. Well, actually, this is when the Black Lives Matter movement was going on. There was a lot of people out in the streets. And there was some protest regarding police and some of the shootings of people of color. And they were wanting less violent actions from the police. And so there was a group out there who were the peaceful protesters, but there's one person who was armed. He had a gun on his holster, who was with these protesters. I questioned it, but okay. And then there came some counter-protesters as well. There were 4 or 5 of them. They had pistols on their holster, on their side. Some of them had long rifles. They had megaphones. The one guy who was protesting against police violence, who had the gun, also had a megaphone. So while a speaker was going on over here, all of a sudden, we have these 2 armed groups with megaphones, literally a foot apart from each other. They're screaming at each other. Wow, talk about a volatile situation. And I was in the back of the audience. I had not really participated too much in protests at the time, but I knew something had to be done. So I went up to the main protester, the nonviolent one, and who was giving a speech. I said, "You got to say something. You got to something with your mic. You got to calm the situation." And then all of a sudden, some other people heard. They started singing. They sang a song. I don't even remember what it was. I might start singing in my poor voice about give peace a chance. Okay, I'm a John Lennon fan. Okay, but there was that song. It might have been This Little Light of Mine, if some of you know that. And I was looking over there, and out of nowhere, actually, to make the situation, could have been safer, could have been worse, there were no police present before. All of a sudden, there were about 6 of them in riot gear. They were ready to move in. I did not want to get pepper sprayed or maced or anything like that, right? But they may have needed to move in to prevent some really tragic violence. That song calmed things down. They stopped yelling at each other, and it's just amazing what things like that can do. But often you have to be prepared for doing things like that. So I'm wrapping up a bit here. I want to give you some ideas about what we do for de-escalation. So with the Panteras group, that housing tenants group, Hassan and I and some other co-workers, we did a workshop with these folks. A lot of them were the people who worked with them for better housing rights and to fix their places. There would be bad plumbing. The AC wouldn't work. It'd be 100 degrees inside their apartment, and they could not get the AC fixed. And they were paying a high rent. And they would go to the managers of these, they were essentially slumlord situations. One of these Panteras was even sprayed down with poison, with insecticide, because he was saying there were bugs in his apartment. So that's what these people were facing. Another time when they were protesting, one of the managers, instead of fixing things up, he paid for a guy to stand out there, guard with a gun, who really hadn't any training. And the Panteras, who were peaceful protesting for signs, they were working with the constable. They were working with the city of Tucson. They were legitimate, peaceful people who were looking to have their rights put into place. And here's this young man who had no training with really how to be a security guard. He's tapping his gun. Talk about intimidation. So there were some methods. Hassan ended up talking to him about what the situation, he was actually living in that area too. He gave up his gun and he joined the Panteras. It's a matter of communicating with people rather than seeing that person with the gun as their enemy. Hassan saw him as a potential friend and an ally who needed education. I'll also talk a little bit about some actions that were done with the emerging youth movement, and Phoenix Peace Builders, my org, we're building a juvenile diversion program, a youth diversion program using restorative justice methods. So for the Panteras, and we developed a worksheet for them. We gave them a workshop. about this. There was some role playing, and had them do something that actually has worked very well for me in even my relations with my wife and my children, is I would look at a conflict situation that I'd been in, and I wasn't proud of how I acted. I got upset maybe because of just a different path they were walking on, or upset money. Anybody have any conflict over money issues, budgets? Okay. You know, that's the number one issue in most households, right? Having a sudden burst of anger, feeling unheard. So, thing is, what really works is when you're in a conflict situation and it didn't go the way you acted, and I'm looking here at self-preparation. I'm not thinking about the other person. Think about what you can do. Think about what I can do in a conflict situation. So, in a calm environment, and I enjoy meditation as well. I do it mostly pretty regular. But contemplating, okay, think about it. What went wrong? How was I triggered? And what did I do? Was I acting in a way that was not consistent with my values? Then plan to stay calm and imagine or visualize how you'll stay calm in the next time you're in a situation like that. Maybe you've heard of athletes a lot. Who go through and you have Olympic skiers, and they're doing these incredible maneuvers. I mean, I would be afraid just standing at the top of one of these drop-offs. And they ski down, and then they do flips and all kinds of things. They will visualize often what they want to do and how they're going to do it in their head. It can work for nonviolent responses to conflict too, or being prepared. If you're going to go out in a protest and something erupts, plan ahead to think, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to remove yourself from the situation, or do you feel trained where you could do something else in the situation to bring it down? Pausing, breathing, and then proceed are three kind of steps general that are very helpful. And then some restorative justice circle techniques that we'll be using with the young adults who are convicted or who have been charged with crimes, and we're looking to keep them out of prison. By the way, we're working now in Tucson area. We're developing a circle process with some extreme Zionists, a group of Israelis who believe that any use of force to defend their country, including, they feel that it's necessary the killing of even children and families and civilians. And on the other hand, there's a group of Palestinians who believe the same thing, only the other way around. These people used to be friends. They used to have walks between mosques and a temple, a Jewish temple. But now with this war broke out, they're at each other's throats. So we're looking to convene a circle, listening circle, and a peacemaking circle to bring these groups together again. So different things that work really well. One person talks at a time, deep listening from the heart, understanding, dehumanizing somebody. Often when we're in a conflict situation, we don't see them as a human being. So see the value, see the humanity in the other people. Pause before speaking, those kinds of things. I found they're really effective, both at home and community. It's amazing. So nonviolence can work, and it's a matter of getting that critical level of people. If we're going to change the country to ways, if you want to change the country, you amass enough people and support, even the most powerful can be separated from their source of power. Yeah. So we can do this. I love your values. I thank you for your breakfast this morning, and I love the conversation, and be glad to take any questions. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I have a few hands up already, and we'll start right here. You ready?
Now, use Denmark an example. Oh, sorry, let me grab the microphone. Use Denmark an example of nonviolence working against the Nazis, but every other time someone tried to stop them without violence, the White Rose Movement, the Munich Agreement, the Rhineland, it failed miserably. Literally, the only reason Denmark ended up being freed is because millions of soldiers were willing to die. Die from the U.S. and the USSR and 20 other countries. Yugoslavia fought them to the bitter end, and then some, and they freed their own countries. They didn't have to live under Soviet rule for decades. Speak up, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Would that be any better?
Yeah, and we'll want to repeat it for those online so that they can understand the gist of the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You used Denmark as an example of nonviolence working against the Nazis, but
Right.
they didn't really have any beef against the Danish. They didn't really have any reason to do atrocities. In Poland, they did. And the only reason Denmark ended up being freed is because millions of soldiers from literally over 30 different countries fought them to the bitter end, tooth and nail. The White Rose movement failed. The Munich Agreement only bought the Nazis time. The Rhineland was remilitarized, and it did absolutely nothing to stop Hitler.
Yeah. So things, do we need to repeat that online? I think the question was, if I may paraphrase, you tell me if I'm wrong, that in Denmark, I think what you're saying is that is not a complete example, that succeeded in Denmark, their nonviolent resistance, because of other soldiers who were willing to give up their lives to protect them.
Okay. People online cannot hear, so sorry.
Okay, and could ask you as pure luck. Well, I would say that it is a complicated situation, and that in Denmark they were, as I understand it, and I'm not a complete student of Denmark, but that they are one of many who have been able to resolve conflicts without, I mean, they could have decided to have armed resistance. And if they had tried that in Denmark, my understanding is that there would have been many more of them killed. And in fact, they were not killed, but they also resisted and did not allow the Nazis to take actions. Now, and did not allow them to really fully utilize their resources in that country. As a former military man, I have the utmost respect for the armed forces, for the people who go in and who are willing to give their lives. But through my study as well, I have found that through endless wars that really were just to me, it's a no-win situation with just spending so much money on violence. If we look at a situation that's a little bit later, we're going to talk about the Nazis and Germany. If you look at what happened in World War II, that after World War I, the Germans were essentially persecuted. They were punished. Their country was not allowed to thrive, and there were just a lot of restrictions placed on them, and somebody like a Hitler was allowed to, it was ripe for that person to arise. The Germans were really upset. And they grew in armaments, they allied with others, and World War II happened. If you look after World War II, and you look at the Berlin airlift, if you look at the Japanese, we bombed them. They attacked us, of course, at Pearl Harbor. But we helped rebuild Germany. We helped rebuild Japan. And now, instead of repeating after World War I, where they rose up in protest to their oppression, now they're our strongest allies. And there are other examples where nonviolent protests. I encourage you to read Chenoweth's book, and where they look at nonviolent uprising. Gene Sharp has wrote 198 methods of nonviolence. And I believe, like what they say, all politics are local. All violence is local. And from my personal experience, I found that if I have a conflict with my neighbor or my family, if I choose to be violent against them or if I choose nonviolent actions, I prefer the nonviolent outcomes. And it usually works a lot better. I saw other people had their hands raised. I don't know if you want to take other questions. If you have a response to that, I'm willing to take it, but however you want to take other questions, comments.
My question is, how come you didn't talk at all about the martial arts? Because they're against violence,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all about protection. So when
Right.
violence does happen, you should have some sort of protection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I studied Taekwondo myself, and I was pretty good at it until I went into a combat. I found out I did not like getting hit, so but there's a lot of Taekwondo, Tai Chi as well. Wonderful movements, and yeah, they are there for protection. And I can't say for myself that in any situation would I not use something. A little kind of nice anecdote. While I was in the military, there was a superior officer to me who would joke around, and we worked in the same office. He would put me in a neck hold, and I was humiliated. He outweighed me probably by about 50 pounds. Well, I learned a little bit of Taekwondo, and I was able to flip him and put him on the floor the next time he tried it. You know, was that nonviolent? It didn't hurt him, you know, except maybe his ego, and he didn't do that to me anymore. So sometimes there may need to be some physical restraint, but also, like Deepak Chopra might say, and many other artisans of nonviolence, when you learn methods of nonviolence, those things would work, and I would very much try to do those first. In de-escalating situations, when I worked at the Department of Child Safety, I would come up at night sometimes. It was one time. Anybody been to Hidden Valley? It's off of the Tohono O'odham Reservation by Casa Grande, and there's dirt roads, there's communities back there. I was out there one time at night. I probably should not have been out there late at night by myself, but in any case, I faced this guy who was taller than me, outweighed me by 50 pounds, and I was talking to him about placing his children with his parents. Actually, he thought I was removing them. He got up, he was ready to attack me. I was not trained in martial arts, and besides, I'm not sure if that would be the best way to defend myself then, but I knew verbal de-escalation techniques. I found common ground. I talked to him about what are best for his children, that we want to do that. And he agreed that the situation in his home was not tenable, was not good for the kids. So we sat down. So I would hope that I would learn enough techniques where I could de-escalate a situation, possible. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
Thank you, Mark, for a very interesting talk, and also for what you are doing to reduce violence in our community. Your presentation made me think about a recent New York Times article about gun violence and how almost all of it is anger at the last moment. It's not thought in advance. It's not premeditated. It's just a flash where something goes out. Someone loses his temper. It goes out of control.
Right, right.
And there's a gun nearby.
Yeah.
And I was thinking how your training must reduce this. And I was wondering if my question is, do you have evidence that this is helpful in terms of reducing gun violence? Are there statistics or records to show this works?
I do not have that at my fingertips, but that's one of the things we looked at when I was investigating cases of abuse and neglect. So the question was, the comment was that gun violence often happens. There was an article in the New York Times where people often pick up guns in a moment of heat, and it's not a premeditated decision. And by using these actions, do they work with gun violence? I haven't worked specifically for gun violence, but I know of other groups that do, like Everytown, and they work with a lot of kids, and they do a lot of training. And there's some gun groups that do some very effective training and talk to people about keeping their guns safe and training people how to use them and using nonviolent techniques. So I'm not aware of the stats, but I bet they're out there. if you're really interested, I could see if I could look something up and bring it back. That's an interesting thing, yeah. But I bet it would work. Yes, sir.
Awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation. One of the things you mentioned at the beginning was internal violence against oneself. What has your journey been like in that regard, and what would you recommend for other people?
Well, a little disclosure. My friend Kazu Haga, I mentioned, wonderful trainer in nonviolence. His most recent book is Fierce Vulnerability. So I'm going to be a bit vulnerable with you and let you know that I grew up in a household where my parents were violent, and there were addictions. Some of my younger siblings did not escape that so well. I was the oldest, and actually the difficulties in that household did not get as bad for me as it was for my younger siblings. My personal journey was wrestling with that and being taught that. Along with a mixture, there were good things too. There were some wonderful times, outings we went fishing and camping. So it's a crazy mixture. But what I saw when things got heated up, that violence or anger was the reaction, and blaming people. So with my journey, especially when my daughter was first born, my first daughter, well, my daughter was first born. She wasn't born again. I would say my firstborn. And my son, I started devouring books on parenting and self-help books. And I got some counseling. And I got a degree. My bachelor's degree is in psychology. And I would find there would be times even in conflict where my anger would flash. And I was doing things that didn't make sense. Now, what I did, I knew at least enough when it got to that point, I'd walk out. I'd leave. I'd go for a walk, even if it was midnight or something, just to calm down. I needed a lot of time to calm down. But as I've learned it more, and then particularly, it's been a progression of a lot of things, but then the study, my mentor, Dr. Lafayette, said nonviolence or nonviolent reaction, it's a wonderful tool, but it's like being a pilot of an airplane, that you're not going to be able to get in a plane and fly it without a lot of training and preparation. And it's the same thing with nonviolent reactions, de-escalation techniques. And so my journey has been, as I mentioned here, and I put these things in practice. And I'll tell you what, life becomes sweeter. It's just when you lead with love, and then but controlling my own emotions, and I'll meditate. Okay, what situations are going to trigger me and set me off? And then I'll think, okay, how am I going to react? And then slowly over time, when I was in those situations, I'd remember my practice and my visualizations and my training, and those kicked in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question. Your thoughts on what happened in South Africa at the end of the apartheid? At the end of the apartheid era, where they had the Truth and Reconciliation trials that went on for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I grew up in South Africa during that apartheid era, and at the end of apartheid, there was a total expectation of a bloodbath.
Yes.
And it was actually Nelson Mandela and the ANC who pushed those Truth and Reconciliation trials, and that stopped the bloodbath in South Africa. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, because you did talk about reconciliation, but that was a big part in stopping that, what could have been incredible violence.
Right, absolutely. So I don't know if those online heard, but this young woman over here is from South Africa, and during the time there was a huge protest around the world even to boycott a lot of the South African things, and how there could have been a bloodbath after just before Nelson Mandela came in, and then what he did, the Truth and Reconciliation Act, and that Nelson Mandela's, and also say Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who orchestrated those Truth and Reconciliation Act, prevented a bloodbath. And that's the truth. And just people hearing, telling their stories. I know a little bit about it. You probably know more than I do. It sounds like, were you there? Did you live there at the time?
I just left.
You just left during the
just
Truth and
left.
Reconciliation. So I've read some materials on that. I've listened to Desmond Tutu online talk about and I've read some of his books. By the way, he just passed recently, yeah. And he and the Dalai Lama were best of friends. They have a wonderful book that came out a few years ago about happiness. And they talk about, and then they share the Truth and Reconciliation, Desmond Tutu does. Absolutely right that there was an opportunity and this is what we're doing in the restorative justice circles as well on a smaller scale. We're bringing together people who were harmed with the people who committed the harm and have them really share and humanize each other. Now, I will say that it wasn't perfect in that there's still some hard feelings in there. That a lot of the black Africans who had their land taken away still never really truly got their land back, as I understand. However, it's a process, and there was not a killing, and there's more government institutions and plans in place to, I think, to be more equitable. But yes, thank you. That's a wonderful example. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Genius is often defined as the guy who agrees with me, and I thank you. To use a kind of churchy analogy, are you not, however, preaching to the choir? We all came here because we're interested in nonviolence, because we're essentially nonviolent, because that's what humanists do. How do you and your constituents get to the people who should be listening to you? Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. So it's a good point. I'm here preaching to the choir, mostly a friendly group, a group who believes in nonviolence. They want to learn more about it, or at least are wondering about it, or you're humanists, for goodness sakes, who want to work together. Well said. So how are we reaching to those people who are being harmed, or who are doing the harm, if you will, or causing harm? Well, I would say one is back with myself. So I find that I have not rid myself completely of violence. With my fellow family members, to really talk about issues, like with my grandkids in school where they face discrimination in there, or there are those issues that come up. So I talk to them, and some of them very much believe in, my goodness, look at all the military, the expectation to go in the military, the recruiters. So we talk to them about this as well. But you're talking about maybe, I have been a volunteer with Black Lives Matter, Phoenix Metro, for some 5 or 6 years now. Yeah. So we're talking to the police. I did an interview with the chief of police. Now, police are human as well. I hear there's 2 types of police, some that go in to protect and really to serve, and others who go in for the control. And I've known police officers on both ends. I worked with police officers. But statistically, a lot of police officers, there are more people of color who are harmed more easily because we're ingrained, and it's a thing ingrained in our society. So it's a matter of I interviewed the new chief of police for the city of Tempe not long ago. It's online somewhere. And I asked him about police immunity and police violence. And with Black Lives Matter, there's protests, and we're involved right now with developing a restorative justice system rather than a punitive justice system. So those are some things. Now, I've got friends. I have not gone out to a protest where I've gotten arrested. I've got friends who do. Maybe someday in the future I will do that. I haven't worked up to that level. And then I mentioned the Palestinians. I work with some friends, and we go out and we protest the UN has described what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza as genocide. Yeah. And I cannot abide by that destruction. And so I've been out protesting sometimes with signs that are pro-Gaza, and you should see some of the looks I've gotten from some of the state legislators in Arizona. But we're talking to them as well. Or the Palestinian group and the Israeli groups who both want peace, but they think violence will do it. So we're working together with them. So those are some ways that I personally am involved. Are there ways that you can think of as well to better talk to the people who are committing violence?
I don't know because my life doesn't bring me into those circles. Speak up, please.
She said her life doesn't bring her into those circles. So, wow, with a lot of mistakes and great humility, I've been a student of racism in our country. When I was in the military, I taught about racism, and that was not allowed in the military, and there were certain actions, but that really dealt with cross-burning and out-and-out discrimination that was really overt. What I've learned since then is the systemic racism that exists within our society and the biases that we can have. Even black people or white people, there's been studies where people are shown a white doll and a black doll, or a picture of a white person and a black person. And there will be psychological studies that will say, okay, we either get one picture at a time, rate this person. Are they nice or not nice? Are they harmful or are they sinister? And this could be generic faces. These faces are picked to be kind of neutral faces. Over and over again, black people are saw as more dangerous than white people. And that's what we grew up with. Even black folks will say. So my point is, I found out that even some of the language I use, like pilgrims, I talked about pilgrimages, and that offended an indigenous friend of mine who was particularly sensitive about the pilgrims coming over back before our country was formed. I fought with him over changing that word because pilgrimage is a sacred thing to me. I mean, people go on pilgrimages for one, but to him it meant something completely different. So it meant going into and really understanding the other. And so what I did, and eventually I saw his point, but he had to really fight tooth and nail for me to see that. And there's other examples, like the word black in our society and the word white in our society, in the English language. If you look up a definition for what is black, there's so many negative things that are associated with the word black. You look up white, there's so many positive things associated with being white. I mean, it's even in a word what we grow up with. We don't even recognize it. So what I'm suggesting as a way to do it is get out of your comfort zone. Go and meet. It was not easy for me to go in a group of Black Lives Matter where they saw me as not necessarily a friendly face. There's some Black Lives Matter groups that will not, talk to white people. Go to an organization that has mostly black folks in it, and really understand and listen where they're at. That way you can see more of what you're missing. Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Another question?
Yeah, well, just more of a comment. A couple of weeks ago, we had a protest down at Dobson and Southern, and there was an incident where some people in a truck came through flying Trump flag and yelling at the people. And some of the people yelled back, and the truck turned around and came up to those people, and one of the gentlemen inside the truck pointed a gun. The problem was ameliorated by one of the organizers who happened to be on crutches. She interposed herself between the two sides, and for some reason, and I'm not clear on exactly why, but she ended up falling on the ground off of her crutches. But the whole thing was de-escalated by that action, and they got stopped by the cops, and all that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
But this was a situation where somebody jumped in and interposed themselves in between the two parties and caused it to de-escalate.
Oh, that's a beautiful example. What a brave woman. For our online audience, the gentleman, this young man over there, had mentioned that he was at a protest in Mesa, and some counter-protesters drove by in a truck, and a gun was pulled out at one point. And it was de-escalated where a woman on crutches interposed herself in between the conflict situation. What a lot of bravery she had. And I bet she'd taken some training in this. I'll bet that she had practiced how to do something like that, because our normal reaction would be to run the other way, or maybe yell and scream and throw rocks or pull out your own gun, right? So she knew a third way. And I'm glad nobody was hurt, and that de-escalated the situation. So, yeah, if somebody's going to do that, I would recommend that you really, you know what you're doing and you know the risks involved. But times like that can really make something like Dr. Lafayette said, something unusual but genuine. And, I'm reminding of my mother-in-law. That's another story. She was wonderful, little tiny woman, and she'd get in between these two big, my sons, and they would just laugh. They'd pick her up, and they would stop arguing, and when she interposed herself in between them. Yes. Another question, sir.
So we have one final question from online. Extremes usually control the dialogue. What can be done in larger groups to cool down the emotional rhetoric?
Okay. What can be done in larger groups to control the rhetoric in extreme situations? Well, in restorative justice circles, so in that kind of case, and those have worked between, well, a friend of mine, a co-creator of this, her name is Ona, and she did a restorative justice circle process with gang members, opposing gang members in Chicago area. And there had been killings on both sides, and they wanted to prevent future killings. And so they got together, and in a restorative justice circle or a peace circle, it's a controlled environment. There's a pre-circle time that's taken where people are prepared for it. They see if they're ready to sit down and talk and agree to rules to listen. And usually there's a talking piece that will go around, and the only person who can talk is the one who has the piece. And the other people need to sit and listen, and it's moderated. And there can be some really amazing magic can happen when in that kind of a process. And she said, oh, it took forever. She was worried it wasn't working because they had spent many, many circles over many, many days, because they would convene. It was on the issue of respect. And they were trying to figure out, okay, how do they respect each other in a circle? And that was just some preliminary stuff to agree to some guidelines. But they stuck with it. Reminds me of other people in my life where they've done things that are harmful. And you set that aside. You don't want more harm, but you stick with them. You love them, and you offer help when they're ready to take it. So, but this group, again, with the circle and the respect, they had to keep coming back and go back and forth, because that was a huge issue in their environment, and respecting each other. Ultimately, they resolved and figured out how to do it, and then the rest of the process flowed real quick on how they came to an agreement where they wouldn't shoot each other. So it's often trying to get to their underlying values. So that's, with combatants, that's one way to approach extremes, is to have a controlled environment where they will sit down. In the moment where you got people pulling guns, we talked about that. But the truth is, too, is that some people aren't ready to talk. And not all people are going to come to those circles or want, they're just so entrenched in their values. And so sometimes there has to be restraint of people like that if that's possible. But you keep working with them, and a lot of times people, they do come around, and they will be willing to listen. I hope that answered the question.
I believe so. Thank you so much. But as we wrap up, are there any books, podcasts, radio shows, websites that you would recommend?
Well, there are, contact me at Phoenix Peace Builders. Okay, you can Google Phoenix Peace Builders, and if would like to support us in our work for restorative justice in the city of Tempe, and we want to build and come over to Tempe. In fact, I've had some talks here, and Michelle was saying, yeah, maybe you guys could use this facility here. So that would be wonderful to be able to have that. Then there's one called On Earth Peace. Okay, not One Earth Peace, but On Earth Peace, OEP. And they do a lot of work around, and they do a lot of education on nonviolence and that. There's another group called Pachi Ibeni that I like. Formed as a Catholic group, but now they're secular. And they, a lot of my mentors, they have in their Nobel Prize winning nominees who are working with them, and they're developing something called nonviolent cities. And they do a lot of great workshops. They're online a lot. So those are some that I would recommend. Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro, actually, they have now a division called Build Love. Building Love. I have it right here in the first one. Building Love Center. And they're really sponsoring this as well. And they do a lot of good community work too around, and their work is centered on blacks, but they do work with white folks. And they do some workshops on what they call abolitionism, which is reducing of our prison system and replacing that with community-based systems. Interestingly enough, a little side comment. It occurred to me recently, indigenous cultures never had prisons. They didn't have police. They had thriving cultures, here. And so there's something we can learn from them too.
So thank you so much for a wonderful talk today. We greatly appreciate it. Please give a warm thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Appreciate the questions.
So Catherine will let me know when we're off.